Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Alexandria Masse. Do I say it correctly?
Yeah, you got it.
Welcome to my channel. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, the first time I saw you was on Instagram, where when you created that enormous, gigantic spider. Tell me,
Yeah.
like, what? And I know that before that you did the centipede. What's your attraction to the giant creepers and crawlers? Like, how did this idea came to you?
Yeah, so excuse me. I've always been fascinated with bugs. I think it's really interesting to take something so small and blow it up to such a large scale because the way we look at it and interact with it is just so much different. And I also think making something that's like much darker and has like little scary undertones like a spider or a centipede and making it like a really bright color is so fun and interesting. I think what first attracted me to it was I associate bugs with like motherly figures and stuff. So like how they're basically living to like raise their clutch of eggs and they raise all of their little young, just like go and crawl away once they hatch. And because I associate it so strongly with motherhood, I also associate crochet with like mothers and grandmothers because it was my grandmother who taught me. And that's kind of where the connection started. And it just kind of grew from there.
Well, how old were you when you learned how to crochet?
Geez, I think I was about like 7 when I learned how to knit, and I knit for a really long time. And then I learned how to crochet like much later when I was like 14 or something. And I kind of went back and forth from like knitting and crocheting, but I've stuck to crochet a lot recently just because I really enjoy the ability to work with it in the round. So for knitting, I find it's a little more difficult to create a shape, like a round shape, and build off of that. For crochet, I find like, oh, if you don't like this, you can just snap your yarn and you can start on another part of it.
Well, one of the projects I saw you posted on your YouTube channel was how to make new pair of pants out of old granny square blanket. Did you want to do that like to reuse something that you have, or like what stopped you from making new granny squares and like just making new pair of pants, right? Like why would take an old blanket?
Well, I think because this blanket was sitting in my parents' basement for a really long time, like because like over the years they've collected so many blankets and some get forgotten about and some get put in the basement, and I was just going through the different blankets in the basement because I was moving back to my apartment, and I came across this one and I was like, oh, this is like really interesting, it's very pretty handmade. And my mom said, a friend made this like years ago, but like they haven't had it out in like a very long time because I mean I haven't recognized it, so it's been a really long time since it's been on the couch. And I asked her if I could, could I take it apart and I could reassemble it, and she said, yeah, go for it. So the granny squares were only attached basically in rows, and so I just took that apart and reassembled it into some pants. And now I wear the pants and get a lot more use out of it. I think the main idea of the project was I felt bad that someone put so much time into making this thing and then it wasn't getting use the same way it used to. So why not repurpose it? And if I don't like it as pants down the line, I can always take the pants apart and turn it back into a blanket.
Well, are you thinking of like creating a whole collection of things like that? Like what else you can make out of granny squares?
That would be really cool. When I originally started crocheting, I was doing a lot of granny square projects just because it was really easy for me to repeat the same thing over and over again. But now that I've kind of branched off, I've been focusing more on like wearable art and headwear. And my fascination with circles definitely goes around that. So about in August of last year is when I really started making a lot of circles. And from there, I've just really grown into like making tons of circles and reassembling circles into like headpieces, into clothes. And so I put circles almost everywhere in all of my crochet projects right now.
How many hours per day would you say you crocheting?
That's a good question. Some days I do a lot of like editing, a lot of like writing and stuff and journaling, but that's a really hard question. I would say like maybe like 5 to 10 a day. It really depends. If I have like, for example, next week I'm going to visit a friend, so I have to leave town. So I have like all of these projects that I need to finish. So pretty much I'm crocheting all day. But I do take a lot of breaks to dye things and wash wool because I'm working with like all natural wool, and I dye all my own colors. So a lot of time is spent dyeing things and waiting for it to dry, or creating something and then dyeing it afterwards.
So I saw you're traveling to Iceland, and that sort of seemed to have like a lot of impact on you. Tell me about that trip.
When I went to Iceland, I applied to an artist residency. So that's just essentially a place where you can live with a bunch of other artists and have a studio space and just like live there and work on art. And I really enjoyed it. I found it very inspirational, just living away from the city. I grew up in the city and I've always lived in cities. So it was really nice to experience something differently and, just be out in nature all the time, which was really cool. And having literally nothing else to focus on other than your art. That's something I do pretty much like every day, but it was an extra incentive to be somewhere so beautiful. And for a lot of the pieces I created there, I was inspired by just, things that were around me, the sun, the stars, um, being out at night a lot to see the northern lights, and just being along like the ocean and stuff like that, and how there are so many horses there. And so, of course, I had to make the horse skirt because I love all the little horses. And I would say that like that trip was really good for me because that was when I completely started dyeing all of my own yarn. So up until then, I would dye about half of my yarn, then purchase half of my yarn that was already pre-dyed. And that trip, I decided to dye absolutely everything. And I enjoyed it a lot. I really loved it. And I really enjoy being able to control the colors, being able to experiment with gradients. And that's what I've switched over to completely.
Well, you also do natural dyeing, right? Why go that route?
Well, I do. I'm not as good with natural dye, and that's why I don't do natural dye as much. I find it's a little more time consuming. You can't get the exact colors that you could with acid dye. I find acid dye is a little bit more controlled, or I'm just not confident enough in natural dye to be able to say the same. But I enjoy natural dye because it is natural, and a lot of the times you don't quite know what color you're going to get, especially with working with different things that I haven't worked with before. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what color this is going to get me. And you can experiment with different mordants, so you can put it in iron and stuff, and it would change colors. And that is something I need to do more of. But for the most part, I stick to acid dye just because I'm familiar with those colors. I know how to mix those colors to get the exact tones and shades that I want. And yeah, I find it also does gradients well. So that's what I pretty much stick to.
Well, walk me through your process, right? So you get an idea of something. What's the
Yeah.
next step? Like, do you sketch? Do you, because I saw with your spider, like there was the whole process and the whole family was involved basically. Like you put your dad to work, like tell me like in general, right? Like you get an idea, what's the next step?
Well, usually it depends on the scale of the idea. For the spider, I was working at such a large scale. I didn't want to start like working on something 10 feet wide because, I don't know what it's going to look like. It's easier to work on something smaller and then, okay, I like this. So I'm going to scale up the pattern and then recreate it. So that's what I did with the spider. I worked small and then I was like, yes, I love this shape. So I'm going to create it at a very large scale. And that's what worked really well for me. I had never really done that before. I'm usually the type of person that I will jump into a project like immediately. I will pick up like my crochet hook, and I have something on here right now. I'll pick that up and I'll just like start crocheting. And I have like, I usually have things in piles, and then I'll work on that one until it's completely finished. I find I don't really work on several projects at once. I finish one almost completely, and then I'll complete it. And then I go on the next one. And then I basically do that over and over again. I find I can't focus if there are too many work in progresses. I have a lot of friends that are like, I have 20 things in my work in progress pile. And I'm just like, I can't focus on anything. I only need one thing to do. And so that's what works really well for me. But usually I have this sketchbook, and you can tell it's getting thick because I put samples in it. And I'll sketch things out and write down what I need and record like little things. And that's how I keep track of everything. So, for example, this is just a page where I did that vest. And so I keep all the yarn that I dyed. So one day maybe I want to match it, and then I keep all the measurements, and then I usually sketch up what I want to make. And I do that in watercolor. and my little inspirations, any pieces of paper that I've collected along the way that inspires me. And yeah, and then I'll just start making it. I usually will add things to my sketchbook as I go. I like to use it as like a home-based journal where, if I start off making this project and it turns into something else, I can record that. So in case I ever want to go back and do something else, I'm able to do so.
Well, one of the comments I read under one of your posts was, can't you just make me a regular hat or something along that line? Like, why make something so complicated, right? What's your take on practicality of crochet versus crochet as art?
Well, I think I'm an artist and I went to art school. So I think the main reason why I wanted to go to art school and not fashion school was like the big debate when I was picking university. I was like, do I go to fashion school or do I go to art school? And I ended up choosing art school because it was like I can literally create whatever I want and I don't have to focus on the whole industry of it. And I can focus on mastering my own skill and creating one of ones. I think what is so exciting for me is that I don't have to repeat the same thing ever if I don't want to. And if I want to, then I also have that option. You always have that option. But when it comes to creating like intricate work and intricate headpieces, um, that's what I want to do. And it's usually not more, it's not more, the answer isn't more complicated than that's just what I feel like. I think once I start adding things, I'll keep adding more things. I'll keep adding more things. And sometimes I take it off and sometimes I change things. But I think the work kind of speaks for itself. And I always feel like I need to embellish and make things more complicated and add more things because you have that ability with crochet. So why not do it? If you can make things as colorful and as complicated as you want, I'll do that because you have the ability to do so.
Well, the whole concept of like starving artists and like looking at art as there's two parts, right? There's business of it, like where you have to make a living, but there's also like the artistic integrity and going after what you want to achieve, right? Do you struggle with that at all? Like, do you think about like what would sell, what wouldn't, like how to make it into a career?
Honestly, if you asked me this a year ago, if I could turn this into a career, I would have said no. I didn't feel confident like I could. I feel very lucky to have, people online that follow me and really like my work and want to purchase my work and want to support me. I'm extremely grateful for that because that has given me the ability to be an artist full time and make art as much as I want. And what I've basically learned is that no matter how like strange or weird you think it is, just share it because some people will not think it's weird. Some people will think it's really cool. Some people will really love it. And when it comes to art, art is all subjective. If I, for example, if I have like a conversation with a friend that like doesn't do art at all, they really don't understand it. And they're like, who the heck are you selling these to? And it's like, well, people that want them, people that want to commission me, people that want certain things. I have a skill that people want to use, so they'll hire me to do things that they can't do. Being a full-time artist, like I didn't have a plan where I was like, I'm gonna graduate and then I'm going to become an artist. I basically thought this person wants me to make this thing, so I'm going to make that thing and I'm going to share it online. And some people saw the thing that I made and they wanted me to make this thing. And then I just keep making things and making things and going on. I think I'm also a very productive person. So I'll continue to make more and more things and experiment with different things. And I think like art, specifically crochet as a medium, has allowed me to do that.
Well, I was recently talking to another fiber artist, and we had a similar conversation where he works primarily on commissions. And he said, like, the only issue is that people who commission his art, they sort of can't imagine what else he is capable of, right? So they'll just order what he already made, something similar to what he already made. So their imagination is limited to the work that he already presented. Do you have fear that like people who commission your pieces gonna also base their commissions on what you already made and you're gonna be stuck in the same loop of making the same things?
Well, yes and no, because at first, when I first started making things and opening commissions, I established that I do not remake things. I will not remake a single commission. If I make this for someone else, I'm not going to turn around and make it for someone else. I just don't really, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to remake things. And I think it's totally valid because that's what I want. And, um, but when I'm able to remake things, for example, the star headpiece that I just made and provided a free pattern tutorial for, and that is like one of the very almost like the only thing that I can remake because it's very simple. It only has a few things and it can be assembled pretty much one way, and that's how it's worn. And because it's one of the few things I make that is able to be remade, I don't want to remake a bunch of them. I'm doing like two more and it's driving me crazy. And then after that, I'm like, all right, I'm done. But yeah, but basically, it's like I don't want to remake this thing that has the ability to be remade. So I'm going to provide a tutorial and a pattern for other people to remake them themselves.
Do you see yourself going into like teaching in?
I don't think so. My mom's a teacher, and I don't know how she does it because I really don't know how she does it. I feel like I'm very impatient with that, and I'm I find it very difficult to teach. When it comes to tutorials and stuff, it's like you are like I assume the person who's watching this already knows how to crochet, so I don't have to teach them how to stitches. Like, yes, I've taught friends how to crochet, and it drives me up the wall when someone asks me, like, "Oh, you should teach me how to crochet." I'm like, literally millions of people do it. It's not that hard. Just Google a tutorial. Why do you need me to do that? Which sounds kind of mean, but it's just like it's not that difficult. Just figure it out yourself. I figured it out myself. You can do it. But when it comes to like one of one pieces and creating like one of one pieces and getting worried about getting stuck in that commission cycle where you're creating the same product over and over again, I don't work from patterns. I don't record my patterns, except for the one star case, which is just like a very different case. So I'm unable to produce the same piece over and over again. When I first started doing commissions, I did two of the same one in a specific color scheme. And the person got really mad at me because I couldn't replicate the thing that I made originally. And I was like, I told you right off the bat, I couldn't replicate it exactly. I can get the colors right, but I can't get the exact positioning of every single little thing because I'm not working from a pattern. I'm making it up as I go. And after that, I was just like, I am not remaking anything. If someone wants me to create something, I can say I can do something similar. I can do it in another color, but it will not look the exact same. And I think that's, I genuinely think fast fashion has made people think that. They're just like, oh, I can see something, I can order it exactly, and I will get it exactly. But that's not how art works. That's not how one of one custom fashion works. You can't look at it online and click, I want to order this exactly, and it's going to look the exact same. Because no, the reality of it is there's an artist like me sitting on their couch, crocheting each piece, washing them by hand, dyeing the colors by hand, and then assembling it by hand. So I could never replicate something exactly.
Right. What also caught my attention about you is that you don't just crochet, like you felt, you dye. So, like to me, you are a true fiber artist, like by the definition, right? Because you do multiple fiber arts. Do you see yourself stepping away from crocheting at some point and going into some completely like different area of fiber arts to create your new project?
Honestly, it really depends. When originally I went to art school, I can draw really well. I can paint. I've done all of these other mediums, but I think what draws me back to crochet is not only the ability to monetize it and make money off of it and make a living because I need to eat and pay bills, but is also the ability and vastness of which I can create. Originally, I wanted to do sewing fashion, and I've done sewing for like my entire life. I've always had a sewing machine. I've always been doing little small projects and little different things. And I've kind of like fallen off of that and mixed it a bit with crochet. Like the Citadel Hill dress I made is on like a sewn base. A lot of like the other things, like the horse skirt, I sewed the skirt and then would assemble it on top of there. So I have that control and skill to be able to mix those things. I think eventually I will do fashion, and eventually I will step away from crochet just because like I know a lot of people that have like hand problems and older women that can't crochet or knit anymore because they've done it so much that their hands now hurt when they do it. So I'm very mindful of my physical ability, and if my hands hurt when I crochet, I'm gonna stop because they're important to me, and I don't want to push that.
Well, I mean, I saw when you were assembling that spider that was like a full body workout there, like because you're bending under like weird angles trying to put it together and for like extended period of time, and then you were complaining about all the body aches. But do you ever get to the point when you just don't feel like crocheting, not because of the physical thing, but just like getting tired of it for like some period of time?
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever been tired of it because, for example, the star, here I am, I'm creating like a bunch of the same thing. And yeah, I'm getting tired of making this exact spike. But guess what? I'm going to make something completely different right after this. And that'll probably, change the whole anger of making the same thing over and over again, which usually solves the problem for me. Like if I'm sick of making the same thing. The next project, I'll just not do it. But
Right.
um,
But
what was I going to say?
by the same token, right, like continuing that conversation, do you ever run out of ideas? Like when you just finish like some huge project and you're like, okay, I have no motivation to start something else because I just don't know what I'm gonna make. Like I just created my masterpiece. I'm very proud of it. I'm very pleased with how it turned out. That's it. Like, do you ever get to that point?
No, honestly, usually like if I ever feel like a tinge of that, or just like what do I do next? I usually feel inspired when I get like the whole, I'm done this big project. What do I do next? I'm like, usually in my head, I'm like, I can do anything I want. I have like this whole list in my head of all these different things I want to do. And I just need the time to be able to do that. I find when I work on a big project like the spider for like 2 months long, this list starts piling up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to start knocking things off of this list. And so I finish the spider, and I just like go running and like working things out in my head. I find like going for a run outside or going for a walk pretty much like solidifies these things and lets me think about these things a lot more clearer. And then I'll come home and I'll like start jotting it down in my sketchbook, and then I'll start from there. I don't find I have like an issue when it comes to inspiration. I think there's inspiration like all around me. And usually what helps, like if I don't exactly know, I'll start something and then I'll get inspired to do something else completely. And it's like, okay, that's okay. I can change course if I want to. I find just not thinking about it and just going into it as fast as you can is what helps me get motivated and get going when I feel like I'm low on ideas.
Have you ever created something that you disliked, Dan?
I've disliked. Oh yeah, tons of times. You'll just never see them because they'll be in the closet. Or if I start making something, and the amazing about crochet, if I make something and I don't like it, I undo it. Like no one has to see it. It does not have to see the light of day. Some things are just so hideous I can't share it with the world, and I just need to undo it. And I think there's like no shame in that, no problem with that. Some things I'm just like, oh my goodness, what did I do? I'm gonna undo it and start it over again.
Well, can you
And
like, give me one example of when it happened?
oh my gosh, I feel like I undo it so fast I almost don't even remember. Or usually it's not like I don't like it, it's like I can't work out this problem to make it look like the way I want it to look. Um, and so I'm just like making a bunch of these ugly things, and I'm like, it needs to look like this, it needs to look like this, and I keep undoing and redoing it. And I would say a big contender for that one was the sun hat I made, where like the different rays of the sun. I find I couldn't get like the right size for the rays, and I couldn't get the right shape, and so I just kept undoing it and redoing it until I got it. Like, and it took forever, but I was able to find the exact shape that I wanted to and continue on with that. I usually try not to waste yarn, so that will usually result in me undoing it and redoing it back into a ball. If I don't like something, I will usually undo it before it even gets to the point where I can't undo it. So I usually have this gut feeling where I'm like, I don't think this is going to turn out the way I want. I need to undo it and redo it right now, or else it's not going to feel solid in my head. I would also say for like things I don't like, sometimes I'll finish a piece and I'm like, this isn't quite the way I want it to look. I put it down and don't look at it for a day. I look back at it in the morning and I go, I know exactly what this needs. And then I'll do that. And if I feel that again, okay, I'll put a bag over it. I'll go to bed. I'll wake up and I take the bag off and I'm like, okay, fresh eyes. I know what this needs. And so I don't abandon pieces or I'm just like, oh, this is just, I don't like that. No, I'll keep refining things, keep adding things, keep taking things away. And until I basically have what I need, you know?
Well, in the ideal world, if you wouldn't have to worry about paying bills, what would you do as an artist? Like, what would you create, you think?
Big bugs. I create a whole room of big bugs. I would create so many big bugs that you need a warehouse to keep all my big bugs. And then I'd hang them all up in a big white room and all the big bugs would be around it. And I would like them all to be very squishy and you can lay on them and you can play with them. And that is my ideal thing. But space is a problem. I can't keep making giant sculptures and leaving them like just, having them in my parents' house. They're very good sports. They have never complained about it. In fact, they love it. They're like, you can take up the dining room table for 2 months. That's fine. We love your big bugs. But, I can't have 20 large bugs in my parents' house. I I have to find them homes eventually. But in an ideal world, I would just love to make giant sculptures. I think of myself as a sculptor a lot more than a textile artist sometimes. Like at core, I'm always a textile artist. But I think of the way I work with textiles is very 3D. Like I am working to create something very sculptural. And I think I would if it was an ideal world and I could do whatever I want, I would do a bunch of large soft sculptures.
Do you have the next bug planned already?
I do have the next bug planned. I just need the time to make him.
Well, are you ever frustrated about that? Because, it's like I'm thinking about myself, right? There is probably 100 projects that I want to need in the next 5 minutes, but there is just one of me and two hands and limited amount of time. Do you get frustrated with all your ideas and that list piling up and you are not capable of doing it all? And have you thought about hiring people to do those little squares for you or those rounds for you and you can do just the large installations?
I've thought of it. I don't think I'm at that point yet. I think eventually one day that would be very cool. Right now, I am too much of a control freak. So I'm too controlling about how my stitches look, how this looks, how that looks. In the future, I would love to be able to do that. But right now, I'm just focused on me and the things I create. Maybe very much maybe in the future, but that would be long down the road.
Are you controlling about all your projects in general? Are you hard on yourself?
Yeah, I'm definitely a perfectionist. And if something isn't perfect, then I don't want to look at it anymore, or I'll fix it until it's perfect because it'll bother me a ton. And I am very hard on myself. Or sometimes I think the star hat, when I first made the star hat, I really did not like it. I was like, this, I really don't like. Something about it just, I feel like I could do better. And I was really hard on myself and I was just like, whatever, I'll just post it. Or you know what, I'll show the other artists that I'm around. And they tell me their honest opinion. They're like, I think this is great. Maybe it needs this, and different opinions. Or, sometimes I'll really not like something or it's not my favorite and I'll post it and it's everyone's favorites. So you really don't know how people feel about your things until you post them. And that's why I think it's important that I continue sharing my things. But when it comes to perfection and stuff, I'm extremely hard on myself and I want things to be perfect. I want them to feel perfect. But at the same time, I also am trying to master imperfection. And I think it's also extremely important that your things look handmade, or at least is for me. I want my things to look handmade. I want my things to look like someone sat there intricately sewed all of these pieces together. And I think that's extremely important for people to see in my craft. I want people to see oh, this was made by a person. I think we're often disconnected from fashion and we don't often think who sewed the sweater that's on my back? Who cut the fabric? Who dyed this fabric? Where did the fabric come from? Who made this? I feel we're so disconnected. We're just consuming all of these things. When in reality, oh my gosh, it takes forever to weave something by hand. It takes forever to turn it into clothes. And I think it's important to leave little things your stitches and stuff. So people are able to see like, oh, this is very clearly handmade. And I think that's what also draws me so much to crochet is its ability to look very handmade.
When you look at other people's work, do you look at it critically? Do you see mistakes? Do you see it as art?
It really depends what type of work. I'm assuming you're referring to like crochet and like specifically like textile art. Um, it I have things that I like and I don't like. Excuse me. I never really voice like the things I like and don't like. I try not to consume that much content if it makes sense. Like I don't go on Pinterest for inspiration or I don't look at my home feed for Instagram because I it's going to show me things that are crochet and fiber and stuff, and it's like I don't want to get my inspiration from other people, and that sounds kind of cruel, but I want to continue getting my inspirations just from real life. I don't want to, I want to develop things on my own accord. I don't want to get accidentally influenced by different textile artists, and I do follow like a lot of textile artists and crochet artists, but I don't look at my feed that often. The only time I'm really on social media is to post, chit chat with my friends, see what they're up to, and then log off and then watch a movie and crochet. But I don't think I'm critical. I think I'm the opposite of that. So when I do see things I'm like, oh, yeah, I like that. But I scroll and I forget about it in 5 seconds. So it doesn't really matter. When I guess it really depends. If I see something in real life, I'm often like, oh, that's an interesting way of creating something. Interesting that I choose to do it this way. Or I don't know. I usually look at other, or I really enjoy the way I create things. So I'm never looking at other people's pieces where I'm like, oh, they shouldn't do it that way. Because usually when I'm looking at other people's pieces, they're trying to achieve something completely different than what I'm trying to achieve. I feel like I'm very different and self-directed in that way and use crochet in my own way. So that's how I mainly make my pieces, but I don't look at other people's pieces in a very critical way. I'm often, pretty neutral about it or trying to learn things. Um, like sometimes different stitches interest me, but honestly, not really. I pretty much stick to only double crochet at this point.
Well, I actually
Because I'm
wanted
more
to ask you about that because, like, do you ever have that, ambition of like putting something challenging, like technically challenging into your pieces, or it's all about like the bigger image, the bigger picture?
Well, it totally depends what I'm achieving. Right now, I'm working on something with like a bobble stitch because I want little bobbles, and that project is going to take forever. So you'll see it in like a month, a month or two. But I usually, yeah, when I'm crocheting and creating things, like this is all double crochet. Why? So I can felt it, and I know what it's going to look like felted, and I love that way. I think I like to experiment with the surface a lot, and that's why double crochet works perfect for me. It also works very well in the round, and that's what first started me to love double crochet is how I work with it in the round so much. And so like on the surface, it like I really like the way it looks. So this is something after I've like dyed it and fold it, and it creates a great gradient. There's no like bumps and stuff that could alter that. And I think what makes me continue to do double crochet is I know what it's going to look like. So I just keep doing that. It's what I'm familiar with. And I'm not usually crocheting to create a specific stitch. I'm usually crocheting to create a structure that I can then felt or full and then sew to something else or do something on top of.
So, like in the upcoming year, like how far do you plan? Like how far ahead are you planning your work, right? Like, are you trying to think like, okay, I'm gonna do an exhibition and I need to collect some pieces for that, or I'm just gonna concentrate on commission pieces and take this out of the way? Like, what's your planning looks like?
I plan like a week maximum. Like a week ahead is the best I'll do because sometimes something will take 3 days instead of 2 days, and that's okay. I'll just make whatever I want to make after that. Sometimes I have deadlines. Like for example, I'm going to visit a friend, so I need to get all of these things out of the way in this week to go be able to do something else. And if I need to travel or something, I'll be like, okay, I'll make a list of this is the yarn I need in this color, so this is how long it takes to dry, and I need to spin it into a cake before I leave. So I'll usually make note of that and do that. But for the most part, I don't plan more than a week because I have a really short attention span, and I find it very difficult to work on multiple things at once. Um, and what's in front of me is what's going to happen, and that's pretty much it.
Well, when it comes to your social media, how stressed are you over what you're gonna post, how to keep in touch with like the world and show them what you're up to?
I try not to think of it that much. I try to just post whatever I want when I'm able to. Um, I know a lot of my friends will like stress over like, oh, I need to get this amount of content out per week. And when I was making that giant spider and I didn't post for like a month, I lost a bunch of followers, but oh well. I gained a bunch back when I posted again. It's like really not that big of a deal to me, and I try not to make it more of a bigger deal because at the end of the day, I'm making art for me. I'm not making art to post. I'm not making this to be like, this is trendy, so I know this will do well, and I'm going to post this and it's going to do well. It's like, no, I'm going to make what I want, and if people happen to like it, that's a bonus. If people don't like it, oh well, I'm going to move on and make something else. I try not to let social media dictate my artist practice or just my practice in general because I'm doing my practice for me. I'm not doing my practice for social media, and I try to always keep it that way.
Well, you started YouTube channel. What was the idea behind it and what are you planning to do with it?
I have no idea, honestly. I'm just like, whatever I record, whatever I'm able to record and assemble into a YouTube video, I'm going to try my best. I've just had friends say, like, branch out and make YouTube videos because, you know, you're able to monetize those a lot better. Like, I'm not getting paid on TikTok. I'm not getting paid on Instagram, which is so unfortunate, but I don't get money from either of those social medias. And they're like, YouTube is the one platform where you can monetize your stuff and make like and make money off of that. And so I'm like, okay, cool. If I'm gonna make content, if I'm gonna record and sit on my iPad for hours and edit everything, then you know, like I might as well try to get paid for it. So I think like my main ambition for YouTube is to try to get monetized. And so I don't quite know where my audience is or what my audience wants. So that's why I'm doing like a bunch of different things where I'm like, you know, doing a walkthrough how to of how I made the spider, and then the other one of like everything I made in September, and then I made like an hour-long tutorial, which was like so long, which I don't know when the next tutorial I ever make comes out because it took me so long, but we'll see in the future. I'm just trying to see like dip my foot in the water and see where I can go. I'm just hoping to like maybe eventually grow more and be able to monetize my content because I'm not making any money on any of social medias.
Right. What's like you mentioned your friends that you talk to on Instagram. Who are your friends? Like, tell me about how you become friends with people.
A lot of my friends are artists. I have a lot of friends like from art school, and like my closest friends are all crazy artists. Is what I like. They're literally all nuts, and I love them so much. And we're all like so invested in our own practices that sometimes we forget about the real world. And I think it's really important to have friends that have a very similar mindset, in a sense where it's just like I'm gonna sit on my floor and make art for 12 hours, and if you don't hear from me, that's what I'm doing. And it's good to have other people that would love to do the same thing. And a lot of my friends, like they're not fiber artists or textile artists. My best friend's a photographer. Like my other really close friend makes jewelry, and I think like the great part of that is, you know, we're in different disciplines, so we're able to learn different like techniques and way of thinking from each other. And a lot of my artist friends online is just people that DM'd me one day and they're like, "Hey, I really love your work." And I look at the profile and I'm like, "Wow, I really love your work. I really like when you made this thing." And they're like, "Well, here's the backstory behind that." And then we just keep chatting, and then next thing you know, we FaceTime each other and show each other what's going on in our lives. And it's really cool to just meet so many people and be connected with them through online. And so I think when like I'm building something or building a crochet headpiece and I don't quite know where to go next, you know, I'll shoot a message out to a few people and they'll be like, "Hey, this is what I think," or talk to me through your problems. Usually most of them are like, you know, just talk to me about it. And when you talk to someone, you kind of resolve those issues in your head. So I think that's what's really important to me about having creative friends.
How do you react to like negative comments on on your Instagram when people are like, what the heck is that?
Ignore them. I mean, like, you know, like at the end of the day, positive comments are nice, but negative comment is still a comment and it still boosts the algorithm. You know, it just, okay, whatever, you're weird. Like, I really don't put any thought into it. I find TikTok is where you get the negative comments. TikTok is where you get berated and made fun of about everything. And so I think Instagram has been very pleasant to me. Instagram has been very kind to me. TikTok, on the other hand, is just a hellscape. Like, people are so cruel to each other. And if something's like really mean, where like it's not about my art, they're saying something mean about like me or my body, I'm deleting it because it's not a democracy. It's my channel. It's a dictatorship, and I'm deleting your comment. But for Instagram and stuff, Instagram I pay no mind because it's just like, okay, whatever. I don't care. Same with TikTok, whatever. Don't care. Pretty much everywhere. Like, if you're gonna leave a negative comment, I'm like, I don't check it as much as I used to. So I really don't pay any mind to it.
Is there like an idea in that list of ideas of yours that you've thought for the longest time and you still not sort of settled on it, so you need more time to think about it, and it's going to be like 20 years from now maybe happening?
Definitely. And they're all big bugs, I'll tell you that. They're all giant bugs in different bug shapes, and they're all big bugs I'd love to make. Bug pillows, like giant stuffed bugs, is all I really want to do. And that's like all I think about. And those are the big ideas I keep in the back of my mind. And I find like when I'm unable to do something, like it'll grow in my head, and I'll just think like, oh, like, what if I did this instead of this? And I'll write it down. And then one day I'll go back to it, and one day I'll make that big bug. But for the most part, those big ideas that stick with me are soft sculptures and large sculptures that I'm unable to do either because I don't have the space or because, you know, I can't take that much time off of creating other things to work on the sculpture for 2 months.
Well, I hope I'm gonna get to see that huge giant bug collection one day and like walk around them and touch them myself, because it's like that would be lovely to have that dream of yours come true. I hope you're gonna have a chance.
That would be wonderful. I would love to do that so much. And
Well,
I will do a big bug soon. I will take that time to do that.
well, thank you so much, Alexandria. It's like it was lovely to have you on my channel and trying getting to know you a little bit better.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad it worked out.